All right. How you doing this afternoon, Jim?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good. I'm great. So I noticed I like getting on your I'm talking with Jim Martin of Harding School of Theology, and I've noticed at the top of your website, godhungry.org, you have self-care as one of your main topics. I want to say your first or second topic on kind of the top of your website. And so when you say self-care, what do you mean by that?
Well, several things. I mean, being attentive to your interior life, being attentive to your soul, being attentive to what happens within you as a person. Um, a lot of that refers to uh, taking care of the private self as opposed to just focusing on your public self. By public self, I mean your married self, yourself as a father, yourself as a minister, yourself as a business person. Um, you can go back to the Psalms and you read through the Psalms, and there are so many of those that were written as David communed with God and speaks sometimes of the emptiness of his soul, sometimes of the what he was going through and the impact it was having on him emotionally. Um, but I guess as much as anything, Andrew, it just be tending to what's happening within you, much like a gardener who maybe wants to grow tomatoes or watermelon or cantaloupe or whatever, had probably ought to pay attention to the soil, if anything is going to grow, as opposed to just paying attention to what you can see on the outside.
So you talked about like your private self and your public self.
Hmm.
Is your private self just saying just you by yourself, whereas your public self is really everything else you're doing in life? Like not just your job, but just your wife, your kids, your family.
Yeah, and when I say private self, I don't mean so much that in a disconnected sort of way, but just who you are when nobody's looking, who
Right.
you are when you're not dealing with your wife or husband, or not dealing with your child.
Right.
Just the person you are.
Hmm.
Um, what Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so yeah, that is interesting because I feel like I just being almost like confession, like I feel like I really struggle with self-care, like doing a
Yeah.
good. I guess in one hand I don't struggle with it because we all do some sort of it, but I think I struggle doing it well. And being early in my marriage, being early in parenting, like you kind of have like this mirror where you can
Hmm.
other people are reflecting, you know,
Yep.
myself a little bit, and that's
Hmm.
very humbling because I never did that when I was single, maybe a little bit, but it definitely has changes when you're married, when you have kids, and not everybody has that, but just
Yeah.
having a community that can reflect and say, hey, like how are you taking care of yourself? And I don't
Hmm.
know if this is normal, but I feel like I get kind of defensive because it's like, oh yeah, I do a great job, which I most like today I don't feel like I'm
Yeah.
doing a great job. Yesterday
Yeah.
was okay, but just like I feel like I get kind of defensive about it. I'm trying to figure out why that is.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I, Sometimes I don't know. And I understand the defensiveness. I think, Andrew, I can
Yeah.
get defensive too sometimes it's when I feel like I'm being exposed and somebody's seeing me,
Right.
and you know and what I know they're seeing isn't exactly who I want to be.
Yeah, that's a good
You
point.
know.
Somebody's seeing me, and
Yeah.
yeah, most of the time we want to be like, oh yeah, that's good. Somebody's seeing me. But
Yeah.
at the other time, it can be, yeah, exposing is a good word. But
Yeah.
so when also I was thinking about self care in terms of like emotionally and physically, like
Hmm.
the Jesus talks about loving your neighbor, loving your enemies. Like Jesus really challenges people. And I think self-care, I think I downplay like how challenging it is.
Hmm.
And just in like churches in our community, at our like our workplace, I don't feel like, I mean, my job talks about self-care a little bit, but it's like a nonprofit Christian organization. I can't imagine too many like for-profit business places talk about self-care, but I feel like it is becoming a little bit more
Yeah.
common. What's your experience with how much people talk about it? Is it something that it seems to come up more, in my opinion? So I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I think people talk about it more. I'm not sure we do that more, but we do talk about it more.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I think more of us are aware that um, it takes a lot to be human.
Hmm.
And when you're young, when I was younger, uh, raw energy will take you a long way.
Hmm.
Caffeine will take you a long way. Adrenaline will take you. And so it's very easy to kind of rely on that. Andrew, I can remember when I was in graduate school, I just prided myself. It was almost like a badge of pride that I could stay up as late as I needed to. I could get up as early. Um, you know, if I just drank enough coffee and pushed through. Uh, and I'm not so sure that's sustainable.
Right. When was a big change for you? I guess just you know, you don't have to give an age, but I guess I'm
Yeah.
wondering what, like, when was it? Somebody? Was it a conversation? Was it a person? Was it? I'm curious.
Well, getting married
Yeah.
helped because,
Right.
after a while, when your spouse looks at you like, what are you doing? I mean,
Yes.
and I thought, well, I thought that was a badge of pride. And maybe it doesn't look so good after all.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know when, exactly I became aware of it. Uh, I, I've always read a lot. And as a minister, I was really curious about people who had served churches and managed to stay alive spiritually.
Hmm.
And I would read like the journals of John Wesley and some other works like that, just to look over their shoulder. What did you do? What was going on through your heart, and what were in your prayers? And I found all of that real helpful. I found, my goodness, those people needed to drink deeply as much as I do.
Hmm. Do you remember some of the things you mentioned? John Wesley. What were you remember any of his practices, or it doesn't have to be John Wesley, but I'm curious too.
Well, one of his practices was to write regularly in that journal, and he was pretty transparent when he would write.
Hmm.
Um, y- you know, I think what struck me, Andrew, was I heard someone describe it like this: life is kind of like a. I was listening to a webinar the other day, and somebody described life kind of like this. It's kind of like a bucket, and you've got these little tubes in the bucket, and something is always going out.
Hmm. Right.
All right. But if nothing's going in, eventually that's not sustainable. I mean,
Right.
in terms of life and your ministry, if it's just going out all the time, and man, it takes energy to live. It takes energy to be married to a human. It takes. I mean, I don't mean that flippantly. I just mean we humans we're all flawed, and so it takes energy to be married to one another. It takes a lot of energy to be a father or a mother. It takes energy to work and to work with people. It takes energy in a church. If you're going to serving people in a church, uh, it takes emotional and physical, spiritual energy, mental energy. And
Hmm.
so if something's not coming in, um, eventually it catches up with you.
Yeah, I think
That's been my experience.
right. I think I've also heard it described like financially, like if you're taking out a
Uh-huh.
lot of withdrawals, but you're
Uh-huh.
not making any deposits,
Yeah,
your bank account's not going to be great.
that's
And
exactly
so
right. Yeah.
that was helpful to me.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that, if you're just giving advice to me, which you are anyways, but so like what are those things to give energy? Is it different for each
Okay.
person? Are there common things that you've in your experience for ministers? Yeah.
I think you're, it probably is different for each person. There
Hmm.
are probably some principles that we have in common. One of the things I try to remember is that myself is a whole self. I'm not just a brain. I love to read, but I'm more than a brain that reads. I'm a body. And inside that body are emotions. And so, in terms of my replenishment, I'm paying attention to my whole self, not just my brain, but though I do pay attention to my thinking, my mind. Um, here are a couple of practices. People talk about the spiritual disciplines. That was
Mm,
uh, been around forever.
right.
A couple of decades ago, that was popularized by people like Richard Foster and Dallas Willard. Many, many, many people have written about the spiritual disciplines, both before and after them. One valuable spiritual discipline today is silence.
Mm,
Right now, in this
yeah.
culture, with all of these crises uh, and 24-hour a day, 7-day a week news, and then all this social media where everybody is an expert, it's something.
Yeah.
Um, Silence can be pretty important.
Hmm. Yeah.
If if I'm not because if I'm not carving out in my life periods where I'm not listening to anything, otherwise that stuff just makes me more and more anxious.
So um silence can be an answer to like anxiety
Not an answer,
or a response or like
a piece.
a piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I'd ever put that.
Well,
Yes, because I'm 34,
mhm,
and the internet and social media and cell phones and iPhones were not a thing
yeah.
until I was in college and grad school. So it's not like I have a lot of experience dealing with how to manage that stuff
Yeah.
either. I think sometimes it's like, well, you're young, you know how to deal with all this stuff, and it's like, not really. Like
Yeah.
we've kind of all been dealing with social media stress all about the same amount of time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, but yeah, that's if my life is nothing but noise from social media, noise from the news, noise from all the opinions of all my friends, um, it shouldn't surprise me that I'm becoming more anxious,
Hmm.
um, because all that impacts my thinking. It's very hard for me to read a lot of all this arguments without it impacting the way I feel. You know, and I'm not suggesting none at all, just suggesting some discipline. That's what I've had to do, Andrew, in my life.
Hmm.
I've had times when I was watching way too much news, reading way too much Facebook, and everybody arguing and posturing, and if you didn't do this, then this means this, or if you did this, this means that. Um, and I've had to back away and say, I can do that a little bit, but not, I can't drink the size glass I was drinking before. It affects me too much. So
Yeah, that's, man. So yeah, the spiritual disciplines, silence, um, what other self-care
well,
practices?
so besides the spiritual disciplines, and I mean, we could just kind of list
Yeah,
a lot
there's
of
a lot of
those.
them, right?
Yeah. Um, Another thing that can be helpful is just caring for uh, my emotions.
Hmm.
Um, uh, this goes back to somebody by the name of Edwin Friedman and Murray Bowen before him. But there's if you look at human relationships kind of on two extremes. One extreme he called enmeshment, where I'm over here at one end, and it is very important for me to be liked, and very important to me for you to think that I'm a great guy. And so whatever you think, yeah, Andrew, that's what I think too. And so I start getting enmeshed with these people. And after a while, I don't even know who I am anymore, because I'm so concerned about my peers, my age group, my friends, okay, liking me. On the other end of that is the disconnected person. And this is the person, they may pride themselves on saying what they think or speak, whatever, but they have no real emotional connection with people. They're
Yeah.
kind of cut off, just an isolated self out there. What I want to be right here, somewhere in this middle ground, I want to be a self that is present with people, a self that is decided, that is chosen to be calmer and less anxious. And I want to try to, I'm going to take some sort of stand. I'll have an opinion, I'll have a thought, but it's not based on a reaction to this group over here. Instead, it's just based on what I think. But in addition to being calm, stating what I think, I want to stay connected with you. See, we live in a culture right now where you're either with me or you're not. And if you're not with me, I really don't have any use for you. And,
Hmm.
it's kind of that back and, well, healthy people aren't like that. Healthy people will go, we don't see eye to eye, but we're still connected. We can still be emotionally connected. And there's a lot of anxiety going on. And sometimes I feel anxiety in me, but I'm going to choose to be calm in all this.
Hmm.
Even when I don't feel calm, I'm going to choose it, because I know I can go home at night and I can come in and I can be an anxious present and stir up my wife and stir up my children when they were living at home, or I can choose to be a calmer presence and make a huge difference in my home or in the people I'm around. But I'm learning to manage myself. Part of and all this is about self-care. I'm learning to manage myself,
Right.
which is what emotionally maturing people do.
So that's really good. I like this idea because I think another thing I'm learning is how much my presence, whether it's calm or not calm, how much my presence affects everyone else,
Mhm.
at my work, with my kids, at home, with my,
Exactly.
and that's something
Exactly.
also that yeah, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
Um,
So could I say one more thing about
yeah,
this?
absolutely.
So I don't want to suggest you don't feel a person doesn't feel anxiety or shouldn't feel anxiety. Of course you do.
Right.
And sometimes it's good to. If you see if you see a snake and you hear the rattles, it might be good to feel a little anxious because you may be very near a rattlesnake.
Right.
If a car is coming down the street as you begin to cross and it looks like they're speeding up, not slowing down, yes, you're getting a little anxious. So, that's the kind. On the other hand, though, this chronic anxiety where I'm just I'm allowing the anxiety that's in the air to permeate my life. So one of the things we can do is to think about, and I learned this from a guy named Steve Cuss, Managing Leadership Anxiety. One of the things we can do is first of all, just be aware of what anxiety does in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to ask you this question in a minute, but I'll answer it first.
Okay.
When I get really, really anxious, Andrew, my head starts hurting.
Mm-hmm.
My head is, it's just tight. And in fact, sometimes I'll rub my temple like this when I'm really anxious. Can you tell when you start to get anxious?
Yeah, for me, it's like my upper back gets really tight, and yeah, that's always, feel like I'm always holding, literally holding, it's like the weight is on my shoulders, and
yes,
trying to lift everything and carry everything. So that's often where I feel it.
So what I can do is and I'm trying to learn to do this, when I start rubbing my temples like this, maybe I'm in the car on the way home and I'm doing this, I can go, wait a minute. I need to think about what I'm doing because I'm starting to get all worked up and I'm anxious. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to walk in my house and I'm going to have the wrong look, the wrong tone when my wife speaks.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned to do is to take a deep breath or two and just go, my body's feeling this, but I don't have to go there.
Mm-hmm.
I do not have to go there with the next person. And I found that very helpful.
Yeah.
Just being very conscious of what's going on in me, how it's affecting me before I say the next thing in an elders meeting or to my wife or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Man, I think that it's so good to focus, like you said, focus on yourself, because a lot of also anxiety can be about trying to control things that we can't control.
Yeah.
So to focus on myself, to take deep breaths for myself, and be able to recognize and have awareness in myself, and to have that non-anxious presence is something that, as like chaplain training, they talked a lot about a non-anxious presence, in being that in the room during times of crisis at the hospital. I'm also wondering this piece of, okay, to have this, to be calm, but then also when you are having, other feelings, how to not like suppress them and still be emotionally healthy and have self-care for your, you know, anxiety we've talked about, but also like your anger, your sadness, to also manage that stuff along with self-care. Because I feel like there's a lot of I don't know about this, in my experience, there's a lot of like passive aggressiveness and kind of suppressed anger too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I'm not aware of what's going on in me, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to come out somewhere.
Right.
What I can do though is I can realize what's starting to happen. I'm getting anxious. It's because I feel very, very passionately about this thing. And what I could do though is I can manage the way I approach this.
Right.
Let's say I'm worked up about something that I really feel like has been mishandled. I'm upset about it. I've got to approach a couple of people. there are different ways I can handle that anger. I can say
Right.
something smart aleck or
Right.
insulting, or am I the only one that's noticed this? That's a great beginning for a mature person, you know. Or I can say, or I can decide, uh, this is a good thing to be angry about, but I will choose how I express that.
Right. I'll choose how to express it. I'm going to have wisdom in my expressing of it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
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 Uh,
Right. Yeah. Man, I think all this stuff is really good, whether you're a minister, whether you're just at home, going
mhm,
to work every day, driving home from work. My experience of, I used to drive, to work by myself.
yeah.
Now, sometimes not during the COVID-19 that we're in,
Uh huh.
but I used to drop off two kids and then drive to work. That's a much
Sure.
different experience. So yeah, I appreciate all these insights, and yeah, I've also noticed something that I talking about social media. I see a lot of your Facebook page as videos of you talking,
Uh huh.
and I've noticed. I wasn't sure if that was like I mean, I know it's an intentional decision because you're doing it, but yeah, what was there something where you said to yourself, just from picking up on kind of what you were saying, where you're like, I'm going to use social media differently rather than posting a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to kind of talk through my life on social media. And I know that you didn't have Facebook when you were growing up. So you kind of
Right.
was that like a decision that I've just noticed that, like, I feel like you've been very intentional with how you use your Facebook page.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I think it's unique. I guess I think that's the other part is I don't see that a lot. So I was
you
curious about
know, well, thank you. I mean, I do a couple of things that um, I do these Facebook posts that are written. I do these Facebook posts that are video. Uh, on usually it's Friday, Saturdays. On Twitter, I will tweet about 10 tweets directed to church leaders in particular, uh, that are meant to be encouraging. I
Right.
publish a newsletter. The next one will come out this coming Monday, just called Jim Martin's Encouragement Note. And
Okay.
every one of those are very intentional. And so I do one thing, and the one thing I do is in those videos or what I write is I try to be helpful in the in the life or the ministry that we're doing, and I try to be encouraging.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I noticed that. I really do. I sense that.
I mean,
Um
there are plenty of people that can post articles about important subjects, and I have thoughts about a lot. I mean, I'm in. I see all of that. I read all of that. I'm concerned about all of it. I'm doing one thing, and I am providing encouragement, and I'm trying to say things that in some way will be helpful to the next step for a person's next step. And I just find that I think that's where God uses me right now. And so, yeah, in fact, it makes me feel good that seems to be intentional because it sure is. I'm glad to hear you say that.
yeah, no, I because I think, I mean, I do a podcast every, try to get an episode out every week, and
Yeah.
I try to I don't write a ton.
Hmm.
I wonder if it's like I'm still thinking about how much writing I did in grad school, and I'm
Yeah.
just like even though I'm a few years away from it now,
Hmm.
so I think I can get back into it a little bit. Um but yeah, I have noticed that just and I think it makes me, because I've done a few videos, but it's kind of like I at least I feel it's kind of vulnerable to like put your face and words, and it's what you're talking about. I too am like, what are people gonna think? What is this person? That enmeshment stuff, I think it
Mhm.
comes up a lot in our
Yeah.
world. It's not just me. It's like all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna look into that more, this
Yeah.
enmeshment and just silence too. So yeah, I've noticed that, and I hope you keep doing it. I
Well,
really
thank you.
I
Thank
feel
you.
encouraged by just seeing your face and your videos, and you're very I think you're very intentional and authentic. So I appreciate that. So
Well, thank you. Um, I appreciate that very much.
yeah.
When I write or talk, Andrew, I guess what's helped a lot, I envision somebody with a cup of coffee sitting at a table reading that, and I can almost see him or her. And I think about that person, and sometimes I'll have certain people in mind. I mean, I'll just envision a friend, and I'll think, I wonder, this would probably be helpful right now. And it's caused me to get out of myself and to get into that person, for a few moments. People are just trying to navigate life, and and life is hard for a lot of people. Some people are in chapters of life where it's fairly smooth right now, but for a lot of people, it's just pretty hard.
Hmm.
So,
And I mean, you would say that before everything else that's happened in our world in the past
yeah,
few months with
that's
the
right.
social unrest and
Yeah.
the health crisis, financial crisis, you would say all that stuff even before that, So
Hmm. Yeah.
there's a time to be encouraging on social media. It's not a bad time to start. That's for
Yeah.
sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
All right.
How do you feel?